Hello and welcome, Night Owl. Nice to have you here, safe, clean, and hopefully in pajamas. Tonight, if you have ever wished you could swap places with someone from history, well, we are about to see how that pans out. We are body swapping straight into medieval times. Spoiler, it is not a vacation. If you enjoy stories that gently ruin the past for you, do hit like and subscribe. Let me know where and when you are snoozing in from. Always amazes me who listens in, especially all you folks wisely not in 12th century Europe. Lights down, grab a drink. You will probably need it. Let us ease into tonight's journey together. Straight into someone else's itchy, medieval shoes. There you are, drifting off in your own bed. Maybe you were curled under soft sheets, scrolling mindlessly through something you barely remember. And then, blink, you are not. You wake up and the first thing you notice, your mattress is now a sack of straw that leaks bits of hay directly into your pajamas. Except, surprise, you do not have pajamas. You are wearing a long, itchy shirt that feels like it has not seen water since the last minor ice age. It smells too, not like detergent or even a particularly bad gym locker. This is earthy, sour, unmistakably lived in, with a top note of animal. You shift a little, hoping to find a spot that does not prick you, and the silence hits, or rather, the lack of it. There is the constant shuffling. Something outside snorts, and there is a chorus of clucks and an occasional moo, only half muffled by the draft creeping in from under the crooked door. Your first breath nearly makes you regret it. The air is cold, raw, and tinged with the aroma of old fire smoke, manure, and damp straw. There is a hint of something sharp, like the vague memory of moldy bread. For a moment, your body tries to convince you that it is just a weird dream and you half reach for your phone, only to close your hand on something lumpy and dry hidden in the bedding. Definitely not a phone. Possibly a turnip. More likely nothing you want to hold onto. You blink again, hoping maybe the world will flicker back to normal and the familiar blue light of a screen. No luck. There is no warm light at all, just the feeble glow of a guttering tallow candle across the tiny room. Shadows slink over the dirt floor, highlighting how low the ceiling is, how close the walls, how everything seems to absorb the little warmth there is. Your skin starts to itch, not just from the shirt, but because you have not bathed in days or weeks. You cannot even tell if it is your hair or something else that is crawling. A faint tickle on your calf ends in the sudden, brief patter of tiny legs. Is that a flea? It is best not to investigate. The point is, there are no showers here, and the only running water is from last night's rain, now steadily leaking in one miserable drop at a time. You shuffle upright, feeling the straw poke in new and creative ways. The taste in your mouth is something between old cheese and iron. You check your surroundings. No glass, no running water, certainly no Wi-Fi signal, unless you count waves of despair. Meanwhile, your stomach flops at the thought of breakfast, which, if you are optimistic, is a chunk of gritty bread, maybe a blessedly boiled onion. Avocado toast is something you might have hallucinated once in a happier century. You may never know true darkness until you are here, in a room with a single smoky candle and no helpful switches or power sockets. Candles do not just ruin the mood, they remind you how much you took for granted. Your so-called smartphone is now just a stubborn shape under your straw pillow, mocking you with its absence. Nothing here buzzes back at you, unless you count actual bees, who are rumored to get inside anything without effort. This is the shake-up nobody actually wanted. You reach for comfort and find mildew. You look for entertainment, and your options are listening to the wind argue with the shutters or counting stains on the wall. And at the center of it all, you, untethered from every digital distraction, stuck in a body already sticky, and faced with a world that smells like the livestock parade forgot to leave. Welcome to medieval life. Day 1. And yes, it really is just getting started. So you have survived the night. Or at least you made it to sunrise without being nibbled to death by anything. Time for the next great ordeal, dressing yourself. If you are blessed with memory, you will quickly realize that the shirt you slept in, itchy, massive, and definitely well-lived, is also your work shirt. Congratulations, pajamas are now just a distant dream. There is no wardrobe crisis here because you have exactly one outfit, and it is always disappointing. Today's collection features plenty of wool and linen, but not the kind that breathes. The shirt is already a little damp in weird places, and you are not sure if that is from last night's sweat, a spill, or just the spirit of the room. Instead of anything soft or stretchy, the only options are cloth with a texture somewhere between burlap and ancient tree bark. As you wrestle your way out of the mummified shirt, it releases a tiny cloud of dust and a scent like sun-baked sheep. Now comes the fun part, layers and laces. You drag on a tunic that feels like a punishment invented by someone who hated comfort. There are ambiguous stains, maybe food, maybe history. There are no tags, no way to tell the front from the back, except by guessing which side is slightly less scratchy. Every seam itches, even the laces, looped around your middle and tied with all the logic of half-remembered shoelaces, seem too tight in all the wrong places. Ah, and underwear. You miss it. The medieval concept might exist, in theory, but here it seems to be just an extra hope. If you are lucky, maybe a square of rag masquerading as shorts. Mostly, it is skin against rough cloth, chafing and pinching at every step. You try not to think about it, because, as far as the Middle Ages is concerned, the comfort revolution never happened. You reach down, pull up hose that do not fit anyone, possibly ever, and discover that the sensation of wool on your legs is its own bleak little morning. If they stay up, it is by miracle or by creative knotting. There are shoes, if you even want to call them that, which mainly keep your feet dry by being hard to get on in the first place. At this point, you pause and remember your old life. The gentle caress of sweatpants, the elastic waistband that loved you regardless, the forgiving promise of a t-shirt that had known the joys of fabric softener. In this century, comfort is a distant myth. Your current tunic is narrowly winning a fight against the cold. Fashion's only real aim is to keep something, anything, between you and the next chill. You give yourself a once-over, laces crooked, hem askew, stains worn as decoration. Medieval fashion is really just survival, wrapped up in daily resignation. You sigh and prepare to shamble toward whatever counts as breakfast, knowing that the worst dressed you have ever been in 2024 still beats this, hands down. Your stomach starts making decisions for you, and none of them are optimistic. It is breakfast, sort of. You search the room for anything that counts as food. There is a chunk of bread waiting, so stale it could double as a building material. You give it a tentative knock, just to make sure it will not knock back. Next, porridge, if you call it that. A thick, lumpy bowl of something grayish, made from boiled grain and a philosophy of disappointment. No sugar, no fruit, just the warmth of lowered expectations. Steam rises, carrying a scent halfway between boiled socks and indifference. The table holds a surprise beverage, a cup of thin, flat beer. This is your morning option instead of coffee. Caffeine cravings go unanswered. Instead, you face a kind of cloudy brew that tastes suspiciously like watered-down bread crust, with hints of yesterday's despair. You try to remember the last time you drank water straight from a tap, cold and clear. Now, the well water here is best for washing mud off your shoes, and only if you do not mind trading mud for something worse. The medieval etiquette is simple. Before eating, search for extra protein, the six-legged kind. You casually peel a crumb off the bread's edge and flick away something that looks like it once had a purpose. The porridge gets a similar once-over. You stir carefully for bugs and resign yourself to crunchy surprises. Sigh, chew, swallow, repeat. If you ever posted a brunch photo online, you owe this version of you an apology. There is nothing here for a filter but disappointment. No bright juices, no sculpted fruit, not even a wilted herb as decoration. Just shades of dull, clashing with the modern image in your mind, where a gentle morning light made pancakes look like art. Your modern taste buds, so carefully trained, are now in open revolt. Bread tastes like old shoe. The porridge feels like eating sorrow straight from the pot, and the beer only reminds you how much you miss coffee that does not come with bacterial risk. You chew with effort, partly to keep busy and partly because each bite is a negotiation between hunger and taste. You are comforted in a way that there is no calorie counting needed. The meal before you could not tip any modern scale. You eat because there is no other choice, and because breakfast is less about pleasure, more about survival. Every mouthful is a small reminder that brunch, if anyone asked, has yet to be invented. So you sigh again, not even trying to pretend this was satisfying. The meal is over. A quick check. Your stomach is not impressed, but it is quiet for now. You scan the empty table, nothing left but crumbs, and possibly a few still moving. Welcome to feasting, medieval style. Somehow, you are already missing the culinary disasters back home. Eventually, nature knocks. Loudly. If you thought breakfast tested your endurance, you are about to meet true medieval humility. Your body politely reminds you it is time for a bathroom break, except you quickly find there are no real bathrooms here. You scan the small, chilly space for anything resembling a familiar porcelain throne. No luck. All you find is a battered wooden bucket in the corner, already radiating a bouquet that hints at previous users, and none of them subtle. If you are especially fortunate, you might be told about a pit out back, a so-called privy. Basically, a hole in the ground with a wobbly plank for a seat. There is no lock, no dignity, just the constant draft of outside air and the comforting sound of livestock spectating a few feet away. Privacy is not really an option. If the bucket is full, someone else's day just got worse, because it is definitely your job to carry it out. The phrase indoor plumbing is a distant fantasy, along with toilet paper. Forget anything soft, gentle, or quilted. Your choices now involve rough scraps of cloth, a handful of hay, or maybe, on a wild day, last year's abandoned manuscript page. And no, none of them are remotely forgiving. There is that delicate moment, hunched over, praying you do not topple, eyeing every shadow for spiders, and wishing with your entire soul for just one button to heat the seat. The smell is a constant, sharp damp, layered with the honest labor of several generations. Your nose twitches. You try to breathe through your mouth. It does not help. You recall, with sharp clarity, the simple luxury of closing a door, hitting a light switch, and trusting that whatever happened would soon be whisked far away by a pleasant white noise of modern plumbing. Here, you become profoundly aware of your own biology. Every part of the process feels like exposure therapy, slow motion, and very public. If you hear footsteps, conversation, or even a cough outside that doorless entryway, your urgent business is suddenly a team sport. And if nature calls in the night, hope you have good aim and better luck. Otherwise, the options include stumbling outside, praying you do not trip on a chicken, and picking a dark, hopefully unused corner. There is funk, there is mud, and probably the judgmental stare of a goat as you do your business. You long for the anonymous privacy of a restroom stall, that soft hum and automatic flush. Here, you finish quickly, using as little contact as possible, and make a silent oath never to complain about toilet seats again. You pull yourself together, if that is the word, and duck back into the sunlight, half wondering if you will ever feel clean or alone in a bathroom again. One thing is clear: if you can avoid needing to go, you will, for the rest of the day. Maybe the rest of the Middle Ages. Modern life may have many problems, but a bathroom you do not have to share with the whole village is a luxury you will never take for granted again. You step outside, still tugging at twisted laces and questioning every life choice. Whatever hope you had for a blast of crisp morning air dissolves instantly. The street hits you all at once, shouting, clanging metal, and animals, so many animals, merge into a soundtrack best described as relentless. Someone's selling onions, someone else is in a heated argument about cheese, and all of it is underscored by the enthusiastic chorus of chickens. Your eyes track the chaos. There is barely enough road for two carts to pass, so of course both do, missing you by inches and splashing something onto your already needy shoes. The mud seems bottomless, and deciding what exactly is in it is a game for someone braver. Spoiler: it is not just rainwater. Livestock wander freely, unconcerned with personal space or hygiene. You dodge a goose with attitude, sidestep a fresh pile that either belonged to the horse or an unlucky traveler, and try not to slip. Every step is a gamble between mud, worse, and slightly worse. Open sewage runs in the gutter, sending up a constant reminder that you are walking through everyone else's decisions. There are puddles of questionable origin. You attempt some delicate footwork, but with shoes like these, your efforts are mostly symbolic. Every brush with the ground leaves another layer. Your hands hover, unsure whether you dare touch anything in reach. Imagine someone telling you to get some fresh air here. The atmosphere is a blend of sweat, manure, wood smoke, and the tangy aftermath of last night's fish market. You breathe in carefully. It is a taste, an experience, and a gentle dare to your immune system all at once. At this point, the locals begin to notice. Their stares linger a little longer than you would like. It seems your shuffling gait, confused expression, and tentative dance around puddles have marked you as not quite from around here. No one smiles. Instead, you get that look, the one reserved for strangers, or maybe just people who have not yet acquired the right set of calluses. You think back to the safety of your regular coffee shop. Soft lighting, the mildly judgmental glance from a barista, the worst danger being a lukewarm Americano. There, you could disappear into a screen or behind headphones. Here, you are impossible to miss, and every glance feels like it might come with a test or a tax. Whatever concept of personal space you once had is gone. Here, the street belongs to everyone and everything. There are elbows, hooves, and sometimes a random chicken against your leg, just to make sure you are awake. One careful sigh later, you move with the crowd, hyper-aware of every cough and hand you brush. You are ready for medieval errands. With every step, missing clean sidewalks, hand sanitizer, and the blissful silence of automatic doors. Maybe you decide you need an ally, a friendly face, or at the very least, someone a little less suspicious of your constant gawking. You try your luck with a neighbor, start a conversation with a basic greeting. The result, a blank stare or a grunted response, if you get one at all. Turns out your accent is wrong, your shirt is wrong, and even your haircut might be a social liability. Everyone speaks quickly. Sometimes it barely sounds like the language you know. One word off, and suddenly people look at you like you just threatened their goat. You try your best imitation of small talk, but here, every chat is a test. Social rules are strict. Status matters. Your stained linen and awkward laces set you apart from the better dressed, while your tiny vocabulary puts you in a league of your own. If your accent does not do it first, half of your sentences break down into confused nods and nervous laughs. Every time you try to join a conversation, you are a walking, talking red flag for someone who is definitely new and probably trouble. You remember the warmth of group chats, the ease of a meme, every click a simple bridge. Here, there are no shared cat videos, no digital proof that you are funny. Banter relies on the right gestures, secrets, and carefully measured respect for unwritten hierarchies. Give the wrong answer, or just look a little lost, and people close ranks faster than you can apologize. You pick up hints of real conversation, bartering for eggs, arguing over the price of firewood, complaints about the miller's honesty. Try to join. Prepare for chilly glances and the immediate sense that your presence is not improving anyone's day. And just to spice things up, there is always the lurking threat of attracting the wrong kind of attention. That, who is this newcomer, and are they about to ruin everything? Vibe. In a world where strangers are suspicious by default, it takes effort just to be ignored. Here, being weird happens fast. One wrong question, the wrong shoes, or just too much eye contact, and you are on the outside looking in. You find yourself wishing you could disappear behind an avatar, or just hit mute. But in the Middle Ages, there is no blocking feature except physically moving out of sight. With every failed chat, you learn it is not loneliness, it is mostly self-preservation. Once any hope of blending in socially fades, you are conscripted by the next force of nature. Chores. Forget a to-do list. Here it is just a rolling wave of what needs to happen so no one starves or freezes. You start with water. That means grabbing a bucket and walking, a lot. Down the slippery, uneven path to the well, past goats eyeing you with suspicion, through enough mud to unlace your shoes, if not your dignity. You haul the water back. It sloshes everywhere. Your arms protest. Then comes wood. Someone always needs it, and there is never enough. You drag awkward logs across the courtyard, stacking them beside a door that never quite closes. Lifting, carrying, and splinters are now your version of a morning gym routine, minus the playlist, plus some livestock supervision. Tending animals is next. Chickens need herding. Cows need milking, or at least an attempt. Everything reacts to your confusion with a mixture of pity and menace. You step carefully, convinced you are one startled goose away from a full retreat. There is mucking out stalls. Yes, the full experience, which means your hands are now officially in a relationship with mud and things you do not want to identify. You keep moving, mostly because if you do not, you freeze. Fetch, lift, scrape, carry. There is no break room. No chair, ergonomic or otherwise. Not even a corner that counts as the easy task. If you owned a fitness tracker, you would easily smash your step goal by noon. Calibration required, medieval edition. And for all your effort, there is not even a mild sense of accomplishment. Instead, the day just stretches, one repetitive step at a time. You sweat, you ache. You envy anyone sitting under fluorescent lights with a keyboard and a questionable office chair. You try to keep up, but every job seems to have 3 steps you never learned and a dozen unspoken rules. Do it wrong, and there is a lecture, or worse, an extra task as a reward for failure. You imagine explaining career mobility to the chicken, who is now glaring at you for taking too long. Your only promotion options are moving up the chore chain to something marginally less grim. Eventually your body, and whatever is left of your motivation, calls it a draw. You trudge back indoors, sore in new ways, muddy in old ones, and every inch of you ready to collapse. The day's work is not done, but you are, for now, nothing left but the slow realization that, in the Middle Ages, the grind never truly stops. Not long after you haul your last bucket and finish apologizing to a goat, the discomfort starts. Yesterday, your worst complaint was maybe a sore back from too much screen time. Now, every muscle is negotiating a separate peace agreement. Your knees creak, your wrists ache, and you feel a tight spot somewhere in your shoulder that you are pretty sure used to be just fine. Your skin is its own battleground, a patchwork of raw spots from wool, angry red from some mystery rash, and a constellation of flea bites that itch in unpredictable shifts. Somewhere, a new blister forms as you walk, and you cannot ignore the dull but insistent throb from what used to be your second most reliable molar. Dental care, such as it is, means hoping the pain stops before the tooth falls out. If you are really unlucky, the local healer gets involved. Medicine here is a choose-your-own-adventure, but none of the endings are good. For a headache, the go-to method is sniffing something pungent from a clay pot or binding a herb poultice directly onto your hairline and hoping it is the right plant. For muscle pain, you are likely to get sympathy, then a hearty suggestion to try ignoring it. Or, if you are feeling particularly lucky, someone will offer to bleed you. Just a prick on the arm, they say, to realign your humors. You smile and decline. They eye you with increasing suspicion. Cough. Out comes the homemade syrup, equal parts honey, mystery leaf, and maybe a dash of superstition. For anything more dramatic, say, a nasty wound or fever, there are always leeches. So many leeches, and none of them particularly gentle. You miss the basic magic of ibuprofen, or the luxury of typing symptoms into a search bar, instead of asking someone whose medical degree is, at best, inherited. And everywhere, infection lurks in the air, on your hands, in every accidental scratch. You are acutely aware of mold spreading on bread, the cheerful coughs in closed rooms, and the unending risk of stepping in something you do not want near an open wound. Most people around you have a cough, a limp, or at least the classic medieval tooth gap. Each handshake is a gamble. You start to miss antiseptics, vaccines, even the nagging voice in your head telling you to wash your hands. Of course, soap is rare and barely recognizable. You would settle for unscented anything. Every minor pain becomes a worry. That headache, is it hay fever or the start of a week-long ordeal? Is the ache in your leg from work? Or is it your body gently suggesting you start composing an elaborate will? You keep your distance from anyone sneezing. Paranoia is the closest thing to a health plan, so you hobble through the day, grateful for every modern convenience you never truly appreciated: basic painkillers, clean running water, the quiet miracle of vaccines, and soap that does more than just look optimistic. In the Middle Ages, survival is the only achievement. Everything else is a bonus. As daylight disappears, the world shrinks fast. The street noise softens into a series of unpredictable clatters. There are no lamps to guide your way, just the thin, uncertain glow of a single candle. Every creak and shuffle feels closer in the dark. Fear slides in with the cold, and you suddenly wish you had never dismissed a nightlight as childish. Outside, there are threats you cannot see: stray animals, wandering strangers, and a healthy population of things that go bump because, frankly, they have no reason not to. Darkness here is not peaceful. It is a power outage that never ends, offering new ways to trip, bump, or just worry over every unfamiliar noise. So you settle onto the familiar straw mattress once again, with new aches and probably a few more insect companions for company. The air is stuffy, your pillow is still just a lump, and every twitch is suspect. Crawling things are inevitable. You simply try to believe they are at least less interested in you now. You catch yourself wishing for modern comforts: a white noise machine to cover the sound of the neighbor snoring through the wall, blackout curtains instead of wobbly shutters, and a soft blue screen tempting you to binge-watch your way to sleep. Here, the nightlife means eavesdropping on mice and flinching at distant shouts, wondering if you locked the door, if you even have a door worth locking. There is no relief from today's effort, only the uncertainty of what tomorrow promises. But before you close your eyes, there is at least a small comfort in knowing you survived one day. Maybe you did not thrive, but you did not get carried off by illness, livestock, or the midnight chill. Sometimes that is more than enough. So as the dark presses close, let the imagined weight of clean sheets and a warm blanket wrap around you. Rest comes not from perfection, but from exhaustion. And tonight, you have absolutely earned it. So that is one long medieval day, ear-splitting, grimy, and packed with more chores than any reasonable person should endure on zero sleep and questionable bread. Hygiene is a memory, privacy a rumor, and every bit of comfort you ever took for granted is suddenly precious beyond words. Modern problems look awfully sweet when the alternative is chasing chickens before dawn or guessing what is floating in your well water. Central heating, pizza delivery, bad reality TV, and the mystery of what to stream next. All little miracles that glow brighter now. You might joke you would not last another minute in the Middle Ages. The best news is you do not have to. So tonight, as you find your own bed, pillows soft, sheets clean, thermostat humming, take a quiet moment to let that sink in. It turns out home is not just a place. It is Wi-Fi, takeout menus, and the steady, beautiful hum of a world where your only chore might be picking a show. Not heroic, but still pretty magnificent. At the edge of the endless Pacific, as night's indigo folds slip across the village, Tama kneels beside his grandmother on the salt-smoothed planks of the wooden landing. The air here tastes of brine and drifting taro smoke, the earth beneath them cooled to velvet by dusk and restless tides. Looming above, the firmament kindles itself into powdery splendor. Stars awaken in their ancient patterns, constellations kindled into order by hands and eyes before memory. This night, like so many before it, belongs to this sacred exchange, the slow, measured unfolding of a world sketched in the heavens. His grandmother's hair, silvered as surf, frames a face lined by sun and centuries. Her voice is both command and lullaby. She speaks not for Tama alone, but for the souls of voyagers who sleep beneath the sand and the roots, the unbroken chain of those who read waves and wind. Her hand, creased as dried driftwood, traces invisible paths from horizon to zenith. "Look," she whispers, and Tama follows the trajectory of her long finger. North and east, Weku o Rongo, the face of Rongo rises, 7 points cupped close, a secret passed from parent to child. These are our first markers. When Rongo's face kisses the rim of the ocean, you are homeward. At her side, Tama's heart fills and aches. He is young, limbs unspooled and voice still unsteady, but the responsibility that hangs between them is as tangible as the gathering dark. The sea has never yielded to compasses or the ticking of clocks. Instead, here, guidance is found in the weaving of constellations. Moonrise, the tilt of a bird's wing, the susurration of distant swells. In each glimmer overhead, Tama sees not only distant suns, but the silent watchfulness of ancestors whose names he is learning to memorize, whose tempests and landfalls are carried in whispered lines of songs. She draws a star chart in the sand with a pointed stick. The marks are spare and sure, triangles, arcs, a scatter of dots. Not every voyage is for land, Tama. Some nights you sail for an answer. These signs, she brushes the sand, these teach you to see beyond hunger into meaning. He remembers when he first realized the sky was more than spectacle. One dawn, half awake, he glimpsed his uncle returning alone, hull carved and battered, spine bent in reverence. The old man had followed the flight of frigate birds, tracked the tattered shape of Te-Haihe, the warrior, until it split dawn like a spear. The ocean has teeth, but it also keeps its promises to those who heed its language. Those promises, his grandmother insists, are found not in ink or paper, but in memory, living, mutable, sacred. Tama listens as the cycles and stories emerge. This star leads for 2 nights, then is swallowed by dawn. That constellation is only visible when the winds favor the east. The language is not written, but woven into chants, into the lilt of a lullaby sung over a cradle, into the careful carving of the prow. Technique cannot exist without reverence. Reverence is nothing without repetition. Tradition means survival. Standing, his grandmother faces the sea. The horizon is a blade, sharp and certain. "You will be the eyes of our people when mine are closed," she says, not mourning but appointing him. Her voice wavers only a little. Stars change their faces, new ones sometimes, and old ones that slip away. But always, Tama, you must remember where home is in the dark. There is a hush then, a space of listening that is older than words. Tama's own voice is lost among the sighing palms. Within him, uncertainty tussles with pride, awe with fear. What if he forgets? What if one dawn the sky is veiled and the sea folds itself into unfamiliar geometry? But his grandmother's hand is steady on his shoulder. Night after night, patient and inexorable, she passes down the constellations. Ti Pira o Tangaroa, the line of Tangaroa. Ti Tuki, the hammer, the slender arc of ancestors returning home. He learns to measure the angle of a star from the lip of a coconut shell, to read the color of deep water by dawnlight, to feel the subtle pulse of a current beneath the hull of the canoe. In these rituals, his fear is neither dismissed nor dwelled upon. Instead, it becomes a thread tightly knotted within the greater skein of tradition. Throughout the learning, there is no sense of ownership. Tama is not inheriting a skill, but rather becoming a vessel. He is meant to bear these memories, the chants, the sky maps, the tales spoken by firelight of voyages undertaken by those who dared and sometimes did not return, with humility. To forget, to allow the patterns of the stars to fade, would be to lose not only a method of navigation, but the beating heart of a people who measure lifetimes in journeys. A breeze carries the hush of nearby surf, rhythmic as a heartbeat. The sky leans lower, the constellations sharpening into clarity as his grandmother recites the names. Each star, each gesture, is a benediction. Tama senses the shape of time, what has passed, what remains, what falls softly into his hands as a burden and blessing both. The sea, limitless, waits. Above it, the charted sky, their map through darkness. Between them, a boy, and beside him, the woman whose memory holds the way home. This is the legacy of the stars, measured in generations, laughter, fear, in the quiet resolve of those who trust the heavens over any chart or compass. Beneath these endless constellations, Tama learns not only direction, but devotion. A navigation guided as much by memory and hope as by the slow, circling sweep of planets across the velvet night. Morning is ushered in not by the relentless glare of the sun, but by a gentle stirring that slips through the palm fronds, tugging at the woven mats with invisible fingers. Tama awakens to the voice of the wind, restless, intimate, and ever-present. A voice that predates scripture, speaking in a dialect known to reefs and canoes. Its timbre is different from the memory-laden songs of his grandmother, but just as resonant, just as vital. Today, the lessons migrate from the script of the heavens to the mutable story told by moving air. The sea, in the fledgling light, still hums with indigo and silver. Boats, sacred curves sculpted from breadfruit tree and hope, rock gently at their moorings. Tama pauses at the edge of the sand, inhaling a world wet with possibility. Above him, the horizon is clear. The volcano's flank is veiled in soft mist that will, by mid-morning, dissipate before the patient sun. His grandmother sits a little apart, back straight, eyes closed, as if communing with what cannot be seen. Today, she is not his instructor, but one who, for now, relinquishes the stage. The wind is the master. Its wordless song must be heard without interruption. Tama understands. Today is to be learned in silence. The elders have warned of the dangers posed not by tempests, but by inattentive ears. The memory of a storied disaster, when a voyaging canoe, spirited by overconfidence and deafness, vanished beyond the world's rim, lingers like a shadow behind every lesson. Thus, Tama listens, to the fraying sibilants in the coconut fronds, to the slap and hush of waves pitching to shore at an angle, to the fretful flutes formed by the gaps in bark and bamboo. In this silence, everything is illuminated. The wind, for Tama, unspools story not in words, but in weight and temperature. From the south comes a breath, heavy with the scent of nutmeg and promise. From the west, a drier, teasing push that upends his hair and sends fine sand swirling against his ankles. He recalls his grandmother's cautions. Not all winds are friendly, and none are constant. Change itself is the only sure companion. The villagers move through their routines attuned to this invisible script. Nets are mended facing certain directions. Taro pits covered with woven grass caps weighted according to the prevailing breeze. Old Tupu, the canoe carver, tests the hull for resonance with a well-placed palm, listening for laments where wood and moving air misalign. Battles and marriages alike are chosen with careful regard for what the wind has to say. Tama kneels beside a canoe under repair, running his hand over wood still fragrant from the tree. He watches the boys his age, already adept with bows and obsidian points, though none are asked to read the sky or wind. Their laughter is sharp, shaped by rivalry as much as camaraderie. He feels the solitude of his path, not outsider, but singular, a vessel for teachings not bestowed on everyone. There is pride in this, but also distance, an awareness that inheritance requires sacrifice. He leans closer, listening. The wind rattles between the ribs of the canoe, a low and mournful note that tugs something deep within his chest. The elders have a word for the quality he seeks. Ha, the humility of one who greets the wind with bowed head and open heart. His grandmother's voice returns to him, not from memory, but suddenly present. There are winds that carry names, Tama. Some bring birth, others farewell. None are to be trusted without feeling their shape. A sudden gust lifts the corner of a palm leaf basket, sending spilled shells adrift across the sand. Quick as a dart, Tama lurches to collect them, his fingers closing over the cool, polished spirals. Before, he would have allowed a small frustration to stir, another sign of his age, his newness. Now, he watches how the wind plays, not careless, but insistent, as if testing his attentiveness. He gathers the scattered shells and arranges them back in the basket, their spiral forms mirroring the eddies he senses, but cannot see. Later, under the tabernacle of midday, his grandmother asks, "What did you learn today, with your tongue silent?" Tama hesitates. The answer is not a list, but a feeling, a mosaic of subtle impressions. The sweet, spoiled undertone in the breeze from the interior, the sharpness of salt where wind strikes rocks, the faint warmth that presages a change none can yet see. He tries to put these into words, faltering at the effort to transmute sensation into language. Finally, his answer is simple, but it is all he possesses. The wind is not only direction, but desire. It wants to move, and we must move with it. His grandmother's approval is a barely perceptible nod, weighty nonetheless. So you begin to understand. The stars provide a chart, but it is the wind that decides when journeys are possible. We learn patience and trust. Sometimes we wait, sometimes we dare. Listen longer. Through this patient apprenticeship, Tama's world expands. The village, the lagoon, the windward reef, all become extensions of his evolving awareness, stitched together not only by memory and ritual, but by the invisible hand that noses at every opening, sculpts every leaf, and coaxes every voyager onward. Each gust is no longer merely a passing phenomenon, but a message meant for him to decipher, a legacy whispered into the bones of every navigator before him. Twilight returns, stamping the water with liquid copper. The air, now tired, sighs its way back toward the distant coasts. Tama sits beside his grandmother, sharing steamed breadfruit and salted fish, gratitude pooling in the silence between them. He understands that the knowledge binding them, stars and wind, memory and foretelling, is not fixed or closed. It is ceaseless, evolving, as elusive as the wind itself. Tomorrow, the lessons will shift again, as all living traditions must. For now, though, Tama holds close what the wind has said. It hums through his marrow. Somewhere, beyond the molten sweep of the horizon, journeys wait to be charted, not only by stars, but by the trembling, tireless breath of the world itself, bearing him forward into an inheritance that is never truly finished. Before dawn, before even the roosters have found their voices, the village stirs with a hush strange and solemn. Shadows are thick as molasses across the sand, and the moon, caught low between strand and surf, stains the water with a pale fire. Tama moves through a world holding its breath, nerves strung tight with anticipation. Today, the learning must leave the comfort of home. The canoe, cradle of tradition, beckons. Men and women gather at the shore, subdued and purposeful. There is little laughter in the stacking of dried breadfruit, the quiet parceling out of fish cured with sea salt, the layering of gourds filled with sour tamarind, water, and poi. Each item stowed is weighted with intention, nothing frivolous, all chosen by hands familiar with deprivation and bounty alike. The horizon, faint and quivering, is the journey's silent audience. Tama's grandmother, hair tied back now in a knot that crowns her dignity, inspects the lashings at each joining. She exchanges words with her fellow elders, inaudible and grave. Tama is called forward not as a boy, but in the manner of those with duties to bear. His place is near the prow, a watchful attendant, though his skin prickles under the gaze of cousins whose roles seem less daunting. The canoe itself, double-hulled and patient, has survived monsoons, voyage after voyage, its timbers darkened by countless hands polishing hope and anxiety into the same surface. It is not by sail alone that journeys unfold, but by the lived intention of generations who have risked the horizon, returning, if at all, with stories thicker than their voices. Tama sits beside the old navigator Kahu, whose eyesight has dimmed with years, yet whose perception pierces every fog. Kahu's hands rest softly on the deck, fingers twitching as if recalling the feel of coarse rope and the bite of steady wind. "This canoe knows its way," he murmurs, voice slurred by age but sure in rhythm. "It remembers more than you or I." The anchors are lifted, heavy stones that thud onto wood as the canoe fetches to the first breath of offshore wind. All is readiness. A chorus of parting chants rises from the shoreline, women and children weaving sorrow and encouragement in notes that shiver across the bay. Tama, startled by tears, presses them away. He has no need for despair. He is not leaving forever. But the act itself, the crossing of lagoon to deep sea, the absence of visible land, lays bare something fundamental. A shedding and an awakening. The lagoon yields its embrace reluctantly, coral heads rearing up beneath the turquoise, shadows that caution and beckon. The paddlers work without speech, their blades painting a rhythm on the water that is, at once muscle and prayer. Tama is fixed on the prow, scanning the meeting place of sky and sea. The star charts of his memory are superimposed upon the morning, a ghost's map layered over shifting blue. Hours stretch like taut ropes. The canoe surges into the swells, each stroke braided with the expectation of those on board. The wind, which Tama has come to heed as elder and oracle, stiffens, its teeth grown sharper miles from land. He tastes salt on his lips, not from tears, but from the world's oldest alchemy. Seabirds, black as lacquer and tireless, arc low above the foaming crests, and Tama reads their heading, remembering lessons traced in feathers and bone. There are rituals not spoken of at home, but practiced at sea. The silent offerings to Tangaroa, god of the deep, an edge of coconut flesh cast into an azure cavern, the measured gaze cast toward the mounting shape of distant squalls. Kahu, beside him, murmurs names for each cloud type, assigns wind shifts to stories known only by voyagers. Rain models the deck, sudden and brisk, transforming hardened wood into slick obsidian. For a moment, the world is severed, sky and ocean welded in streaming silver, the sun a memory behind heaped columns of rain. Tama does not yearn for shelter. Instead, he leans into this baptism. The first voyage, especially under the watchful eye of the elders, is trial as much as tutelage. Now, raw fear dovetails with awe, each spray and gust a question. Can I trust myself to read these shifting glyphs? Every choice is consequence, every uncertainty rendered magnified when the horizon is nothing but an endless curve. But the sea gives lessons in increments, and slowly his tasks accumulate. He learns to mark the altitude of a star with the spread of his palm, to judge whether a swell arises from a storm 3 days distant or from the shoulder of an unseen atoll. At night, when the stars revolve in their slow dance, he recites each by name. Ti Kavinga, the pathway. Ti Ika a Maui, Maui's fish. Meanwhile, the canoe's progress is judged by how the foam streams past the hull and by how the wind tangles in the woven pennant at the masthead. Meals are simple and rare. A handful of cooked taro, a mouthful of rainwater caught in cupped hands. Tama listens in the darkness, to the creak of planks, the strain in paddlers' voices, the way Kahu's gentle corrections are spoken as if to the sea itself. Nothing here is wasted, neither energy nor error. Each misstep is folded into the accumulation of knowing. For days, the world collapses into a circle of wood and people, water and sky. Fatigue thickens thought. Even fear gives way to the routine motion of muscle and vigilance. And through it all, Tama comes to understand the silent assurance of continuity. Each navigator is both student and teacher, memory living as muscle, as song, as the shared desperation for landfall. At dawn, Kahu lets Tama lift the steering paddle. It is heavy, carved from dense iroko, the polished ridges bearing scratches from the hands of ghosts. The responsibility is momentous, to hold a vector true under fickle heavens, to balance faith in pattern with readiness for surprise. When, at last, a scrawled line of green freckles the horizon, a shimmer that resolves into distant palm crowns, joy is as subdued and deep as the ocean. No one shouts. Instead, the crew sits in quiet communion, the canoe gliding peacefully, fatigue and hunger overwritten by the knowledge of having held the passage together. In the hush, Tama inhales the aroma of unfamiliar earth and wild flowers, the crying of birds whose songs are new but whose purpose is ancient. To welcome, to proclaim arrival. It is in this moment, as the hull noses toward the shallows, that the word home remakes itself, not as an island or point of departure, but as belonging itself. A sense carried, voyage by voyage, across the face of waters. This, then, is the long voyage, not the journey measured by stars or currents, but by the heart's slow transformation, anchored in tradition, yet open to what wind and wave will reveal. Through hardship and repetition, Tama is reshaped, neither child nor elder, but a link in the molten chain, guiding the past into an uncharted future. In the weeks that follow landfall, the rhythm of return is not one of rest, but of reckoning. The island welcomes the voyagers with a cautious embrace, its sands cool, its groves veiled in shadows that yield birds unfamiliar and fruit carrying foreign sweetness. For Tama, every step upon this otherness is taken with the memory of water surging behind him. The voyage, though complete, lingers, an echo shaped by distance, waiting, and the restless pulse of lessons still unfinished. He moves through the days half anchored to the sea, even while his hands learn new tasks ashore, mending nets with strangers who share only scattered words, helping to dig yam beds whose scent of earth is thick, fecund, unsettling. At night, sitting beside fires with those who listen for the click of insects instead of the hissing rush of tide, Tama feels both honored and burdened. In each conversation, his story is requested, as if by hearing the crossings repeated, the listeners might taste the salt that clings to his skin, glimpse the stubborn trembling of the horizon he left and the one now before him. It is during these quiet evenings, when the air is heavy and the sky tilts with strange constellations, that Tama discovers another truth. The echo of the ocean does not fade. It returns in the shiver that comes with a sudden wind, the momentary staggering of a bird's shadow across the ground. The way water refuses to ever quite still itself in the hollows of his palms. Each night, after story and song, Tama walks alone to the point where the land is undone by waves. There, the sea greets him with a presence more intimate than any friendship. It is neither a memory nor an adversary, but an ever-patient companion, murmuring the music of infinite beginnings. He listens, noting the undertones between the rumble of waves, a rhythm beneath sound, as constant as breath and as shifting as prophecy. He realizes now what his elders meant when they spoke of hearing with more than ears. The ocean's voice is a chronicler, its stories not always given in words. One evening, a storm presses in from the northeast, swift and sullen. Islanders haul up their boats, tie down fronds, stoke hearths against the lashing rain. Tama, caught by the drama of sky and water colliding, stands at the threshold of shelter, senses sharpened. He remembers Kahu's instructions. Storms, too, are teachers. Every wave, every tantrum of wind, etches new instruction. Beneath the jagged percussion of the tempest, Tama does not shrink, but expands, letting the wildness affirm his place in a continuum, neither master nor victim, but a participant in the ocean's ongoing experiment. When dawn comes washed and new, the village emerges blinking into light. Repairs commence, mats raid-dried, shelters rethatched. Tama helps where he can, his fingers quick, his eyes returning always to the surf. In the aftermath, something in the community shifts. Gratitude made visible, a subtle nod to interdependence. They share stories of ancestors lost and saved by such storms, and in these retellings, Tama recognizes a kinship that transcends lineage, an unspoken knowledge that all who live by the ocean carry its mark within. During a gathering meant to honor the successful crossing, Tama is approached by an old woman whose gaze is cleaved by cataracts, but whose bearing is fierce. She asks of the journey, not the logistics, but the choices. Which winds were trusted? What was surrendered to the night? Was there a moment when doubt almost won? He answers with candor, finding in her questions a kindred gravity. I listened to what was silent, he says softly. She nods, satisfied. That is the seed from which the next passage will germinate. In the days that follow, Tama finds himself haunted less by anxiety and more by a growing sense of stewardship. The patterns of wave on stone, the migrations of fish, the filaments of roots clutching sand. All these are variations of the same lesson. To endure is to yield and adapt, but also to remember. The voyage was not merely the crossing from one land to the next, but the awakening of an inner territory, a geography marked by humility and vigilance. The ocean, always expansive, is reflected within him. Its echo shapes his decisions, tempers his pride, and infuses ordinary tasks with meaning. When it comes time to prepare the return, Tama volunteers for the rituals of readiness. He gathers with the navigators, old and young, around the hollowed hull beneath a cascade of unfamiliar stars. The elders from both islands participate, their chants braided together, weaving languages and legacies. Maps are drawn again, not on bark or parchment, but gestured with coral shards in wet sand. The convergence of tradition and necessity shaping each line and angle. The children listen at the periphery, wide-eyed, absorbing with the hush of those invited to the threshold, but not yet permitted to cross. That night, Tama stands again at the shore, caught between longing and allegiance. He feels not rootless, but renewed. His capacity for wonder no longer tinged only with fear, but expanded by what survival and storytelling have wrought. The ocean's echo is persistent, each crash on the reef a measure of what must be passed down, not just as fact or technique, but as pulse and prayer. He understands now that he is not merely the recipient of knowledge, but its amplifier, his own voice one note in the ceaseless chorus, unraveled by every voyager who dares the expanse. As the returning canoe bobs at anchor, alight with preparations for the homebound journey, Tama finds his grandmother awaiting him at the water's edge. The years weigh lightly on her now, as if the tide itself supports her. They do not speak. The hush between them is more eloquent than any language. For Tama, everything is changed and nothing. The ocean's long memory is alive in him, a quiet summons echoed in every cell. He will board the canoe not as a novice, but as one remade by distance, belonging now to the sea, to land, and to the lineage of voyagers whose wisdom is at once burden and grace. Night pressed softly against the limestone walls of Alexandria, its air sweet with the scent of jasmine, carried from the gardens which drifted over the endless stone, through columns lit by the hush of oil lamps. In the untroubled dark, the great library still breathed, the last of its caretakers trailing between shelves, whose shadows seemed older than memory itself. It was within this quiet, deeper than the murmurs of any city, that Alia moved. Alia was slight, caught between the uncertainty of apprenticeship and the first heat of purpose. Her youth a flickering lamp, within the incandescent sea of knowledge. By the laws of Alexandria, she belonged to the library as much as to her family, her mother a priestess of clever hands, her father a merchant forever at sea. Yet it was Theon, the philosopher, who shaped her real inheritance. Under his stern, affectionate tutelage, she had learned the grammar of stars, the rhetoric of stones, the arithmetic of color and heat. She had also learned the art of listening, the patient attention that gives living breath to parchment and ink. Sometimes, late at night, Theon paced the library's echoing corridors, his robes the color of dawn, muttering to himself verses of Aristotle and scraps of Egyptian lore. Other times, he would draw Aelia into hushed corners and ask her impossible questions. But on this night, the philosopher's step was absent, a silence that bent the air with both invitation and dread. Aelia pressed a palm to the cool flagstones, felt the echoing drum of midnight. She had always known there must be more hidden chambers, secret caches, the bones of generations of scholars quietly feeding the city's roots. Near the room of papyrus copyists, beneath a marble plinth cracked by centuries of strong, salt air, her fingers caught an edge, a wedge where the tile lifted. Breath held firm in her throat, she pried it loose. Dust rose, gold in the lamplight. Beneath, a narrow stairway led down, coiling into the earth. She slipped through, lantern trembling in her hand, and let the stone swallow her footsteps. The air below was thick and copper-heavy, the taste of forgotten ages. Shadows draped the spiral steps. Each turn shrouded her in further silence, until the whisper of Alexandria faded altogether. With each step she imagined the painted ships of the harbor, the shouts from the wheat market, all receding, leaving only the raw nerve of wonder. The chamber opened suddenly, vast and round. Vaults arched overhead like the ribs of a sleeping titan. Every inch of wall was lined with scrolls, chests sealed by lead, jars still faintly aromatic with myrrh, vials dark with sediment, prisms flickering weak sparks from old sunlight. Tables bore copper alembics and mortars scabbed with verdigris. Glassware, both delicate and monstrous, gleamed softly under a dusting of centuries. Aelia's breath caught in her chest. This was no archive for the public, where geometry and statecraft lounged upon their shelves. What lived here belonged to the silent, clandestine currents beneath Alexandria's brilliance, the hidden river of alchemy. She knelt before an alabaster casket at the room's heart, fingers trembling against its glyphs. Coiled serpents, the lotus entwined with flame, the gold circle of Helios ringed in black. She dared not open it yet. Instead, she drifted through the chamber's periphery, plucking scrolls where the script still glittered. Symbols tumbled, a language for transmuting lead into gold, for harvesting dew at dawn, for compressing a decade's wisdom into a single crystalline tear. Her own knowledge was lamplit beside these sunbursts. Aelia traced her finger along diagrams of acids and humors, cycles of dissolution and coagulation, the veiled dream of transmutation, not simply of metals, but of mind and matter both. This was the promise the library kept safest, the one that had raised suspicion and envy in rulers, hearts for generations. Here were the secrets by which matter might shed its old, leaden sorrow and rise light as spirit. Here, the forbidden hope that humankind might follow. Above, Alexandria turned toward dawn, comforted by the illusion of order, but Aelia felt what shifted in the currents. In the city's upper districts, news unfurled in murmurs. The emperor had condemned the library and its stewards, frowning on all sorcery and forbidden arts, fearful that within these walls soared forces no state could bridle. Soon there would be edicts, torchlight, the heavy step of soldiers. Perhaps even Theon, for all his learning, could not shield her, or this fragile, glowing maze of memory, from the flames that waited, intent and hungry, beyond the marble threshold. She pressed the lid of the casket, resolve and dread wound tight beneath her ribcage. In the labyrinth of Alexandria, knowledge was living, volatile as mercury, radiant as sunrise, shrouded in peril. Aelia, cradled within shadows, felt her own promise take root. She would safeguard these secrets, whatever storms might come. In that subterranean quiet, beneath the city of philosophers and dreamers, she listened to the drums of history rumbling far above and dreamed, fiercely, of a wisdom unlost. Dawn seeped through the high windows of the great library, melting the gray of morning into layered bands of pale gold and blue. Columns, veined with the shadow of palm fronds, stood sentry-like and unwavering, their surfaces scarred with the graffiti of absent thinkers. Aelia emerged from the hidden passageway, her tunic stained by dust, and her mind shifting under a freight of secrets. The world had changed in her knight's absence, the stillness of twilight now replaced by the rustle of urgency, an air of unease fluttering among the custodians and scholars. She moved silently past the scriptoria, divining the new anxiety in the way voices lowered when she approached, how eyes flickered to the mosaic floors when her step echoed between the shelves. These were men and women who had carried, for years, the terror of their own brilliance, of knowing what must never be spoken, and yet knowing that even silence was not always a shield against those who hunted science as heresy. Theon awaited her in the peristyle, his gaze heavy with the residue of sleepless hours. Unfurled scrolls sprawled across his knees, an armillary sphere revolved idly beside him. He did not ask where she had disappeared to. His wisdom was the kind that understood curiosity as necessity. "You feel it, then," he murmured, gesturing for her to sit on the marble bench, its stone cool even beneath the sun's embrace. What trembles above us is not just the threat of soldiers or imperial edicts. Alexandria itself is faltering. This city was always a mosaic, never a monolith. One broken tessera, and the whole image cracks. His words echoed across the courtyard, picked up by the chirr of cicadas. It was there, in the interplay of light and foliage, that Aelia felt the vastness of her inheritance and its peril. She unfurled a slip of parchment she had copied in secret. A formula inscribed in symbols so precise, so old, that its very logic seemed to flicker in and out of time. The scroll had described the birth of glass from sand and fire, the transformation of impurity into clarity, paired, subtly, with a meditation on the nature of change within the spirit. She pressed it into Theon's hand, voice soft. "There is an entire chamber below, hidden by the generations that came before us. Not just philosophy, but alchemy. Methods for seeing what others cannot, fragmentary, dangerous." Theon's eyes narrowed. Behind the sweep of his scholar's beard, his mouth trembled between fear and reverence. "You speak of the fragments, those treatises forbidden even in the library's golden days." Aelia nodded, a sensation of falling opening inside her. "If these are lost, the world will not know what it could become. The Emperor's decrees, He calls such knowledge a corruption of the soul. But corruption is only blindness, isn't it? To refuse transformation, even the painful kind. Outside, life in Alexandria pursued its habitual rhythm. The water carriers sang at the cistern. The fishmongers argued over heaps of silver scales. Children wove predictions from shards of colored glass trodden underfoot. But in the library, the pulse was different. Fear thinned the air. An imperial herald had arrived, his palanquin a redness among the granite and dust, unspooling orders with the flat calm of a man who has never risked his own curiosity. He spoke of heresy, purification, and the glory of the emperor. Throughout the halls, words once spoken sacredly now slid behind closed doors. Aelia and Theon retreated into secluded alcoves, weighing each possibility with the care of one measuring quicksilver, a substance known for its beauty and its tendency to slip away. They debated not only how to hide, but whether to trust, to teach, to leave clues for distant generations. Perhaps, Theon mused, there were minds yet unborn who would find meaning in these fractured texts, these formulas blurring the lines between fire and flesh. As sunlight waned, pouring in at slanted angles, and catching upon motes suspended motionless in the half-light, Aelia alone carried a satchel of brittle fragments down once again into the secret chamber. She laid them once more among glass retorts and beaten copper. There, amid the hush, she copied her discoveries onto hardened wax tablets, stitching old wisdom with her own uncertain insight. What was alchemy, if not hope manifest in the patient labor of hands and thought? Each page, each vessel, a prayer cast out into tumultuous centuries, one which might someday return, if only as a glimmer. The library seemed to lean in around her, shadowy stacks whispering blessings and regrets. The fragments, which bore bright veins of possibility, demanded care not just for Alexandria, but for the broader world, for the untold exiles who hungered for knowledge, still deemed too dangerous to endure. Night gathered again. This time Aelia was not afraid. She recognized that the world was always made and remade in rooms where the rightly curious dared to work in the silence between days. She gathered the fragments, scroll, formula, wax, and memory, resolving to kindle their light whenever darkness pressed too close. In the days that followed, Alexandria's sky adopted a new color, one thickened with ash and rumor. From the parapets above, banners shuddered in a wind that felt weighted with foreboding. The city's pulse hesitated as news scattered. Imperial agents had entered the harbor, armored and inscrutable, their presence marked by the clangor of iron and the clipped Latin of foreign command. The hush that pervaded the library was not the calm of contemplation, but of anticipation, a silence grown brittle beneath the point of a spear. Aelia watched from the uppermost gallery, her gaze skimming rooftops blanched with midday glare. What she saw below was a city suspended between memory and erasure. Temples, marketplaces, lecture halls, all bore the tension of sinew stretched to breaking. In this drawn breath of Alexandria, her own fragility mirrored the precarious poise of shelves and scrolls, each awaiting the first shudder of disaster. It was in the hall of Callimachus, a labyrinth of catalogs, the names of lost volumes pressed into every tile, that the circle of resistors gathered. Theon presided beside a column banded in lapis, his voice scratched with exhaustion, but never surrender. With him stood Hera, the mathematician, Sylvanus, whose translations of Persian treatises filled half a vault, and a dozen more, constituting the last line of defense for wisdom's endurance. Maps unfurled across the table, routes into the catacombs, lists of sympathetic merchants, hidden caches beneath the Serapean and smaller libraries. They spoke in tight murmurs. What might be dispersed? What must be consigned to memory alone? It was no longer enough to trust to the endurance of parchment and clay. Now, wisdom needed agile custodians, capable of smuggling insight through the city's capillaries. Aelia listened, the surface of her mind alive with possibilities. But underneath, something deeper pulsed. The dreadful certainty that some things would be lost, no matter how they labored. She remembered the secret chamber scent, the precise weight of vials, and the peculiar beauty of symbols, each one so vulnerable to a single careless flame or soldier's boot. She thought of her own hands, ink-stained, sometimes unsteady, yet compelled to act by faith in renewal. Activity within the library became covert ritual. Pages were transcribed onto strips of linen, rolled tight, and stitched into the linings of robes. Formulas were sung in coded lullabies, passed among the children of slaves and scholars alike. Songs which, to a careless ear, bespoke only harvest or sea, yet which carried transformation in their cadence. Hera entrusted Aelia with a slender jar of orpiment and bitumen, a compound whose very existence was rumor, capable of dissolving the surface of clay tablets so that only traces would persist, invisible to the uninitiated. As the emperor's men drew nearer, pausing by the gates to demand inventories, to question any face marked by intellect or the ink of scholarship, evening came to resemble the closing of a great sieve. Every night, something was lost. A set of platonic solids vanished from the teaching room. A papyrus burned at the foot of the colonnades. A friend disappeared, his lodgings stripped and left open to the Mediterranean air. Alexandria had entered the era of subtraction, and only those prepared to adapt survived whole. Aelia descended more frequently into the hidden chamber, ferrying ambiguous bundles beneath her tunic. She learned to step silently, to cover her tracks in a dust no broom would ever disturb. With each visit, the room felt heavier, a vault swelling with both terror and responsibility. She worked under the gaze of ghostly predecessors, alchemists whose notations in the margins had become more intimate than the voices of the living above. Theon, always sparing with his advice, pressed a scrap of carefully folded linen into her palm one dusk, as alarm bells tolled distantly. Even in darkness, the act of preserving kindles its own kind of illumination. No state, however absolute, can master the stubbornness of memory. Trust the patient alchemy of time. In this crucible, Aelia met strength she had only guessed at in herself. She learned to trust not the library's walls. Their permanence had grown illusory, but the flexible weave of those who cared for knowledge. Networks formed, as unseen as roots beneath the mosaic courtyards, whispered instructions in the baths, couriers who sewed fragments into bolts of exported linen, lantern signals exchanged between roof and bark as night's first hush descended. One evening, as the sun expired in bronze over the Pharos, a new sound rose, the chant of soldiers approaching, the metallic percussion of shields. Aelia, gathering her satchel, felt the entire city hold its breath. From her window, she saw flames leap skyward in the district of warehouses. The siege was not of stone, but of mind. the besiegers not content with conquering a city. Only the extirpation of its soul would suffice. The library's defenders did not waver. Within the beset halls, rituals endured. The lighting of lamps, the turning of pages, secret conversations that rang with anguish and resolve as scrolls continued their silent exodus down alleyways and into the hungry spaces of the world. Alia recognized that knowledge survives not merely in matter, but in the lives that bear it, broken, remade, scattered, yet impossibly persistent. Outside, Alexandria's heart pounded against its cage. Inside, in that trembling calm before the hammer fell, Alia traced a single glyph across the glass of a window, a mark of transformation, of hope's slender incandescence. The siege tightened, but within her chest and within the dark arteries of the library, the will to remember burned ever brighter. The night after the flames crept toward the library's outer walls, Alexandria seemed to lie suspended, caught in a hush so profound that every movement shimmered with apprehension. The city's thoroughfares, once jubilant with philosophy and barter, emptied in the aftershock of raid and rumor. Even the moon, scarred by smoke's thin veil, cast only the faintest reflection upon the water's edge. From her vantage behind shuttered lattices, Alia watched processions of soldiers pass, their torches bobbing through the labyrinthine streets, searching for beacons of forbidden thought. It was then that Theon summoned her in secret to the innermost archive, a chamber heavy with the exhaustion of centuries. Its doors closed with a somber finality, its air thickened by the size of parchment and the slow disintegration of ink, felt almost corporeal. For hours, they sorted scrolls by urgency, by irreplaceability, by the cryptic calculus of what the world, abandoned to imperial fire, would need to remember. Some she wept to consign to the flames. Others she etched into her memory with a devotion that bordered on the sacred. Amongst the relics of knowledge stood a young man, no longer an initiate, but transformed by trial. Nicandros, the last of the scribes. He bent over his desk, lamp guttering, stylus rasping over the final sheaf of wax. His hands bore the calluses of years, spent chasing the vanishing ink of vanished masters. And yet, his eyes glowed with the stubborn light of perseverance. Where others had slipped away or been taken, he remained, an anchor for the tradition of preservation in a city washed by tides of forgetting. Theon addressed them both with a gravity that made the walls themselves seem to lean close. What can be copied must be. What cannot must be transformed, incanted, remembered, living in the breath and sinew of those who survive. He handed to Nicandros and Alia a selection of the rarest formulas and philosophical treatises, faded blueprints for the making of colored glass, the distillation of plants for medicine, the insights of women philosophers whose names lingered only between lines. They worked in silent concert, the division of labor absolute. Nicandros with syllables and symbols, Alia with coded patterns embedded in diagrams, glyphs that layered practical recipes with veiled allegory. It was a fragile dialogue, the passing of wisdom between hands as if across a chasm, each stroke of stylus a bid against oblivion. Their diligence resonated with the gentle percussion of distant unrest, the library's defenses faltering, the tides of edict and accusation gradually eroding the last courtyards of sanctuary. Periods of transcription gave way to whispered debate, how to encrypt the knowledge so that it might elude even the sharpest imperial inspector. Nicandros devised a cipher, an alphabet hidden within the natural swirls of wood grain or the dance of the mosaic tesserae. Aelia revised her alchemical diagrams so that the same line could, to one who did not know, describe both the vessel for distillation and the parabola traced by Venus in the night sky. There developed between the two an unspoken kinship, bonded not by sentimentality, but by the mutual recognition that endurance resides as much in the mind's agility as in the constancy of hope. Seated together by the guttering lamp, they exchanged not confessions, but invocations. Dreams for the city's future, for lost masters, for children who might, centuries hence, rediscover some hidden fragment amid the ruins. Outside, the siege continued with the slow, grinding certainty of the sea reshaping stone. Each morning returned fewer guardians to the library's breach, but the small fraternity of preservers persisted, each act of memory a refusal to yield. Aelia felt the weight of her task settle on her shoulders, no longer as dread, but as a calling. She saw, in Nicandros's precise script and steady presence, the possibility that the alchemical transformation they so often discussed was less about lead or gold, and more about the substance of human resolve. Theon, his beard streaked with ash and sorrow, withdrew at last, leaving them with a benediction carried in a whisper. Whatever is destroyed, whatever is hidden, remember, the soul of Alexandria is yet untaken if even a single flame of knowledge passes forward. The city outside grew restless, troubled by half-silenced voices and cracked mosaics. Within the library, amid failing lamps and the scent of oil and scorched vellum, Aelia and Nicandros inscribed what they could onto whatever scraps remained: pottery shards, the backs of disused ledgers, the inner bark of trees. Each word became a testimony to the library's refusal to die. In that fragile dawn, Aelia slipped into the secret chamber for what might be the final time. She placed her hand upon a sealed chest, its lock warm from her palm. Nicandros emerged from the shadows, bearing a single, newly finished scroll. Their eyes met, a pact unspoken, a torch passed. Alexandria's last scribe and its final alchemist. Together, they sealed the chamber. Then, with nothing but the sounds of pikes against marble in the distance, they vanished into the dense streets, a scattering of memory beneath the indifferent, awakening sky. Dawn arrived at last upon Alexandria, not with the warmth of hope, but with the brittle clarity that lingers after catastrophe. The city glistened in the aftermath, every fragment of marble and column in open discourse with the sun, as though the ruins themselves whispered testimony. The library, once a palace of reason and luminous debate, now resembled the broken shell of a nautilus. Walls laid open, shelves blackened, scrolls curling upon themselves in the funereal air. Ash drifted through doorways and windows, clotting in the hollows where knowledge had slept for centuries. From a distance, the devastation appeared complete. Imperial banners fluttered languidly amid the detritus, signals to an empire whose primary harvest was submission. By noon, new proclamations had been nailed to temple doors, decrees denouncing heresy, alchemy, old philosophy, and its keepers. The scholars had scattered into exile or silence. Yet the silence was not absolute. Beneath its weight, a pulse endured. Aelia and Nicandros moved through the city in anonymity, their faces indistinguishable among the crowds that leaned into the city's new wind. They journeyed by back routes and market shadows, crossing altars of offerings left to forgotten gods and fountains rendered mute by neglect. Every step away from the library was an ache, still the burden they carried, scraps of hard-won memory, diagrams etched in code, lore stitched within the seams of tunics, grew heavier not with regret, but with a fragile certainty. In those hidden archives of the body, Alexandria's spirit endured. Days passed. The city's new rulers failed to find the rumored treasures, for the true inheritance of the library no longer rested in open vaults or monumental halls. Instead, it echoed in slivers of formula, passed along merchant caravans, in mathematical riddles shared as children's games beneath the city's battered lintels, even in poultices for wounds that bore the faintest vestige of alchemical wisdom. The secrets passed from mother to daughter, from freedman to apprentice, refracted and concealed within communal prayers and idle song. In a one-room workshop near the edge of the quarter, once famed for its glassblowers, Aelia and Nicandros found refuge. The shelves there were sparse, bottles clouded by use, tidy heaps of dried herbs, the bright glint of copper wire. Each evening, as saffron dusk crept inside, they revisited the work rescued from the inferno. The fragments, shards of poetic cipher, practical formulas, star charts scored on tile, were examined, safeguarded, and sewn anew into the quiet commerce of daily life. Others joined them, drawn by a thirst that official law could not quench. Not all came openly. Sometimes a coded message would arrive with a bale of wool, or a question would be posed over the edge of a market stall. Aelia taught in whispers, explaining that true alchemy began in the transforming of thought, the gentle molding of perception, and the refusal to settle for ignorance. Nicandros, ever the scribe, recorded their days in characters so fine they seemed like the etchings of wingbeats, chronicles not for public glory, but for a distant time when the world might be hospitable once more to inquiry. There were risks. Inspections grew harsher. Neighbors sometimes vanished without warning. More than once, a scroll had to be torn to shreds and dusted among the roots of olive trees, the words entrusted to earth and memory alone. Still, they persisted. Within this small tapestry of dissent, knowledge became feral yet beautiful, adapting to hardship as a vine does to wind, clinging, twisting, flowering anew in unexpected places. Occasionally, Aelia would close her eyes and recall the library, not as ruin, but as sanctuary, full of possibility. In such moments, she did not dwell on the loss. Instead, she marveled that wisdom can be most alive when it is most imperiled, when its survival depends on the courage to protect, conceal, and at times, let go. There is an alchemy of endurance, she realized, as intricate and miraculous as any transmutation of base metal. Years would pass, emperors would fall, and tides would erase the names of conquerors from the city's edge. The legacy of the library became a sotto voce tradition, hidden, whispering along the veins of Alexandria and beyond. What had once been hoarded in grand halls now traveled in the marrow of those touched by its light. No ember ever fully smothered, wherever an apprentice mixed paints to catch the colors of sunrise, or a mother brewed a fever draught according to half-remembered instructions. The last alchemist's work persisted. It was not immortality, as the ancients had dreamed, but it was perhaps the only immortality that mattered. On an evening muted by a haze of far-off fires, Aelia placed the last of her rescued tablets in a clay urn, sealed with wax, and buried it beneath a fig tree flourishing near the city's battered eastern wall. Beside her, Nicandros pressed a last trace of script into the sand, a cipher set for no eye but fate itself. As they stood, the wind carried a lingering perfume of resin and myrrh. The library was gone, but its dream, scattered, seed-like, luminous, remained. For as long as curiosity burned in the hearts of those unnamed and unrecorded, the alchemy of Alexandria would survive, radiant in the ashes, waiting to be reawakened by those with eyes yet unclouded. Dawn stirs upon Murano's narrow lanes with a faint trembling, as if the old bones of the island ached from memories that only the first light can soothe. It is here, cradled in the brackish arms of the lagoon, that Alina follows her grandmother through corridors salted by centuries, past shuttered shops, fading doors, the perfume of the sea never quite conquered by the sense of molten sand and cooling cinders. Stones underfoot glisten with a perpetual dampness, reflecting light in broken mosaics, as if echoing the vanished grandeur of Serenissima herself. And above, murmurations of pigeons spiral over rooftops, circling bell towers softened with algae and time. Inside the workshop, a sanctuary built not of stone or wood, but of heat, the world is sharper, more elemental. Here, the air thickens with anticipation and the tang of fire, every corner marked by a record of hands, smudges of ash, delicate fragments sparkling beneath benches, tools worn to the shape of the family line. Alina stands uncertain, her breath shallow, between racks of colored rods collected over a lifetime, each tint the product of secret alchemy. The vaulted ceiling is dark, absorbing the fevered conversations of flame and glass, of memory and future. Her grandmother, Livia, is not cruel in her instruction, but neither is she soft. Her voice is sand and smoke, her movements exact and unhurried, like a prayer repeated for the 1,000th time. "You dream too much, Piccola," Livia says, feeding a sliver of green glass into the furnace. "Here you must learn not to dream, but to see. Watch how the glass flows. Feel where it wants to go." Alina mimics her motions, cheeks flushed not only from the furnace's nearness, but from the weight of silent expectations. She knows the lore whispered through the archive of their tiny studio. That in old ages, Venice chained its glassblowers to Murano, forbidding them to leave lest their secrets scatter to the world. That for centuries, glass was not just window or goblet, but a covenant, the city's true heart protected from betrayal by bond and by blood. The rod in Alina's hands trembles, its tip haloed in pale luminance. She rolls it slowly, as she was shown, until the glass slumps pliant as taffy, and the shape, indistinct, catches a breath of possibility or disaster. Livia's fingers hover just out of reach, ready either to praise or correct. Yet in this moment she holds back, allowing her granddaughter to test the boundaries of craft and lineage. There is no clock in the furnace room, only the rhythm of the kiln yawning open and closed, the hush of the long pontal rod gliding through soot. Shadows coil and uncurl against the bricks as the new day chases fog from the canal windows. Above, church bells toll, a reminder that outside, the city moves forgetful of the fires that shaped its glass. But the truth, Alina knows, is different beyond these stone walls. The storefronts at San Marco fill with foreign imitations, their brightness brittle, boasting flamboyance without soul. Tourists wander in for cheap trinkets stamped Venezia, but carries nothing of its soul, churned out by machines in distant places that have never tasted Murano's silt and wind. Livia sighs when she speaks of this, her words tinged with grief, as though a sacred language is being lost one phrase at a time. Yet, in the sacred heat, the old ways persist. Livia shapes a delicate stem, Alina's own creation cracks, a fine fissure spreading through the glass like a mapped river, and she feels shame brink her eyes with stubborn tears. Nothing is wasted, her grandmother murmurs, taking the cooling shard and feeding it back to the crucible's hunger. We begin again. That is the rule. Lunch comes late, a silent meal in the back room, vapor rising from polenta, the table set with their own misshapen bowls, testaments to learning, to patience. Across from her, Livia's gaze is unbroken, the blue of her eyes smoldering with the memory of artisans lost and guilds dissolved. They will tell you our work is dead, she says, but art cannot die. It can only fall silent or change its shape. They eat in a hush filled only by the occasional clang from the distant foundries, those that remain. Alina's thoughts drift to the future she has glimpsed, a world where Venetians might be the last guardians of a tradition, already slipping through their fingers. Its beauty undervalued, its secrets hungered after by distant, profit-minded strangers. The weight of past and present presses upon her, each fragment of glass, each scar on Livia's hands, a testament to survival amid all that threatens to erase them. That afternoon, she returns to the fire, hands trembling but determined. If there is sorrow in her, it is not for what has been lost, but for what she must yet defend. As the flames reach upward, the molten glass blooms once more, a fragile promise pulled from heat and memory, sparkling with all the defiance that smolders in the heart of Venice. When the evening drapes itself across Murano, the island's labyrinth of alleys and waterways glimmers with reflections, liquid, fragile, ever-shifting. Alina presses her palm to the cool glass of the studio window, eyes tracking the lantern-lit boats that drift beyond, their silhouettes distorted in the running tide. Night on the lagoon is a mosaic. Black, gold, the accidental blue of starlight. Murano listens, centuries deep, to the sigh of water, and the distant laughter of those who imagine the city's miracle is eternal. It is during these dusky hours, when labor gives way to longing, that Alina steals moments to wander the silent corridors of her grandmother's past. Livia's stories are not always told, more often left in artifacts, stowed in corners of the workshop, relics from times before supply chains and counterfeiters. Alina knows each one. The cameo vase with its opaline petals kissed by silver leaf, the panel of aventurine flecked with captured stars, the olive green rosette medallion that once crowned a vanished palazzo. In her hands, these relics are cool and infinitely patient, as if waiting to be understood. Livia's own youth, Alina begins to sense, was not so different. Each generation learning the language of flame under the gaze of mothers and grandmothers, each believing the world's appetite for grace and fragility would never wane. Yet the echoes Alina hears from the island's guild halls are uncertain now, uncertain as the future of glass itself. The gathering of masters, once proud and contentious, is thinned to a scattering of old men and women. Their voices at the monthly council are subdued. Tales of orders lost, contracts undone, foreign buyers choosing speed and shine over tradition. Even the bells that once signaled the hour of the glassblowers, revels now toll with an anxious cadence. Alina returns home late one evening to find Livia at the table, a letter unfolded before her. The script is precise and cold. A distributor from the mainland writes with apologies. They will not renew their commission. The market changes rapidly. Our customers request new things. Livia does not meet Alina's eyes. Instead, she folds the letter with a shaking precision and tucks it beneath a pile of old ledgers, as if paperwork might staunch the bleeding. In the days that follow, the atmosphere shifts. The kiln's roar loses its confident pitch. Tools are cleaned more often than they are used, and the dust of idleness gathers across forgotten shelves. Tourists still browse the streets, but their faces are fleeting, their fingers hovering over pieces they do not buy. Each night, the inventory ticks further in the wrong direction. Alina feels the weight of it, a pressure that hounds her even as she dreams. Visions of shattered goblets and empty forges quickening her heart. One morning, as the humidity presses against the leaded windows, Alina paces before the largest mirror in the workshop. It is an aged panel, rimmed with tarnished silver and swirling with faint distortions, remnants of a technique taught by Livia's own mother. Staring into its depths, Alina is unsettled by the multitude of selves she encounters. Apprentice, daughter, would-be savior, helpless inheritor of ruin. The mirror neither flatters nor forgives. It fractures her image into possibilities, all uncertain. For the first time, she fears that the workshop's light may dwindle for good, yet it is not simply despair that takes hold. There is a restless spark. With the city's future uncertain and the past fraying at the edges, Alina becomes haunted by a question. Is tradition only a shadow, something doomed to dissolve into memory? Or can it be reimagined, called forth like a new constellation from scarred glass? She spends long hours poring over frayed notebooks and diagrams, tracing the lineage of their craft, learning not just what her ancestors made, but how they once dreamed against their own privations, how they courted both ruin and resurrection. On a night marked by thunderstorms, a rare violence over the lagoon, Alina finds herself unable to sleep. The workshop hums with uneasy energies as she lights a single lamp and turns over shards of colored glass on the workbench. Each speaks to a different moment. A failed ornament, a discarded attempt at symmetry, a chip from a cup whose mate was lost to the canal. Here, among these fragments, she senses an opportunity. If the world is no longer willing to see the wholeness of Murano's art, perhaps it can be shown its beauty in the broken, the unfinished, the unexpected. As dawn approaches, Alina's resolve crystallizes, sharp and bright in the half-light. She will try something reckless, to weave what was once spurned into something new, not a rejection of heritage, but a challenge to despair. In her calm determination, there is the echo of Livia's earlier lesson. Nothing is wasted, all is return. The workshop will not become a tomb. The storm passes. Outside, seawater glistens atop the paving stones. The air smells of ozone and regret and hope's faint awakening. Alina gathers the scattered fragments and, for the first time, sets them at the heart of her next design. She will not chase the market's fickle brightness. Instead, she will dare to craft something the island itself might recognize, something honest as a wound, luminous as the dawn after the tempest. There is a particular hush in the early hours when creation contemplates itself, before the first furnace is stoked, before footsteps disturb the dust of dreams. Alina, newly resolute, finds herself awake long before sunrise, hands wrapped around a cup of bitter chicory. The night's blue silence presses close against the workshop walls. There is a world outside this small studio. But in this suspended moment, it recedes to a rumor carried by an idle breeze. She measures her breath against the shiver of the flame and the thin hush of the lagoon beyond, sealing off the familiar world as though it were a vessel ready to be transformed. The decision to risk tradition is made not in a blaze of inspiration, but in increments, a gathering of small rebellions, each blessed by the tacit consent of the silent glass. She turns the shards collected from failures past in her palm, feeling their edges, noting how each one catches the morning and spills it into uncertain color. Alina recalls, with quiet gratitude, the words of unknown ancestors, that the alchemy of glass lies not merely in repetition, but in the courage to alter its chemistry. Outside, fog braids itself along the canal, cloaking Murano in secrecy. She lights the kiln, mindful that she is not merely a custodian, but perhaps a catalyst. As dawn rises on a city still drowsy with fading night, Alina's mind charts a path that meanders beyond the boundaries drawn by her elders. She experiments using the discarded and overlooked, fusing fragments of different origins, blending the melancholy of one hue with the curiosity of another. The result is a language not written in any master's codex, a mosaic, not of single-minded perfection, but of gathered stories, accidents, and the ghostly fingerprints of the forgotten. It is not the smooth, symmetrical vessel that defined Livia's apprenticeship, but a bold new constellation, sharp-edged, unpredictable, and undeniably alive. Word of her audacity stirs the old house before breakfast. Livia's skepticism is both a weight and an encouragement. She hovers at the threshold, arms folded, blue eyes cooling the room by degrees. "There are ways things have always been done, Alina," she offers, not unkindly. "Our buyers will not pay for what they do not recognize." Yet beneath her sternness, a flicker of curiosity, an invitation to transgress, so long as the flames are not squandered. Alina perseveres through small catastrophes. Kiln temperatures spike or dip, colors bleed into one another, shapes collapse in the annealing oven. But in this friction, she rediscovers play. The sense of wonder that drew her first, as a child, to the glowing ribbon of molten glass, the illusion that anything could be conjured if one's courage outshone one's fear. She learns to appreciate the mischievous logic of the medium, how it submits so easily to disaster, yet just as easily can be persuaded into beauty by an unorthodox hand. By the end of the week, a collection of these experiments gathers on the sideboard. Not goblets or vases, but sculptural forms, twisted helixes, half-moons glimmering with the colors of Murano's dawn, unlikely floral shapes that seem caught between germination and flight. They challenge the eye to assemble harmony from chaos, to find wholeness among fracture. Livia regards them with amiable exasperation, but Alina catches her tracing the shards, intricate shadows, when she thinks no one is watching. Soon, a ripple of interest stirs among the local artists, painters, mosaicists, even a weary printmaker from the mainland who lingers at the window. Unable to look away from the studio's new lexicon of light, their language is different and their praise cautious, but Alina finds herself drawn into a wider conversation. Together, huddled over espresso in cramped kitchens, or on the salt-blanched stones by the canal, they talk of necessity and invention, of the deadening grip of tradition, and the risk inherent in allowing art to evolve. Her experiments become a quiet scandal, a gamble watched by a dwindling circle who understand, more than anyone, the cost of not gambling at all. For the first time in months, customers linger in the front room. They ask questions, tentative and shy, about how these forms have come to be. Some are repelled by their lack of polish, preferring the familiar. Baroque chandeliers, precise goblets, the understated clarity that once built fortunes. Others, visitors bored of the expected, or Venetians yearning for new purpose, find themselves entranced. They run fingers along jagged edges, hold up pieces to the window to catch the strange play of light, as if seeking some elusive story inside the offered ruin and renewal. One piece, an irregular bowl, its rim ragged, its interior flecked with the glass's own birthmarks, draws the attention of a foreign gallery curator. She returns, patient and persistent, courting understanding rather than negotiation. Alina does not rush to accept her offer. She recognizes the delicate line between innovation for survival and innovation as spectacle. The final decision must honor both the fire that forged her and the city struggling beneath her feet. As summer deepens over Murano, the workshop glows not merely with the furnace's warmth, but with the stirrings of possibility. Livia, caught between pride and apprehension, admits as much with a rare touch of her granddaughter's shoulder. We endure because we change, Alina. But remember, the glass keeps the memory of every hand. In these crucibles of risk and love, Alina discovers her true inheritance is not simply to guard the old dragons, but to invite new ones. Her glass is not the last word of Murano. It is a beckoning, a question asked in flame and color, for which there can never be an easy reply. Summer yields to a coppered autumn, and the sun lowers its gaze upon the water, bathing Murano in a hush of long shadows and spectral glows. The workshop stands, as ever, in defiance of the world's inattentiveness, a box of fire and silence nestled in the weary archipelago. Alina and Livia move within it with a practiced solemnity, their gestures a private liturgy, echoing quieter as the days draw in and the air chills with the coming of winter. The furnace's breath is now a guardian against the encroaching dark. By now, Murano's commerce has dwindled to a seasonal trickle. Bargemen row with languid strokes past shuttered piers. Shopkeepers sweep their thresholds without hope of crowds, and the canal's surface, once a trembling mirror for passing trade, wears the drowsy look of a forgotten god. Some glassworks close their shutters, the hands within departing for jobs on the mainland or for exile entirely, joining the diaspora that murmurs of modernity's lure. At times, Alina imagines she toils within ruins, but within these ruins, the embers burn on, insisting upon their stubborn continuity. An invitation arrives late in the month, addressed in a crisp hand to Livia, but passed, without comment, to Alina. A commission from the city itself, a single monumental piece to commemorate Murano's lineage of glassblowers, an artwork for the public square. It is, Alina understands, both a last homage and perhaps a quiet eulogy. The municipality's patronage comes not from grandeur, but from a sense of mourning. Something must be remembered, even as the island's voice falls to a whisper. Alina crosses to the piazza at dawn, standing on the tessellated stones, letting the memory of generations ripple out beneath her shoes. There she listens to the wind, to the bells struggling to assert themselves over the motorboat's drone, and pictures her task. This work must be neither a dirge nor an empty display. It must gather the lost hours, the unspoken griefs of those whose names echo only in workshop registers and dust. She sketches dozens of ideas, swooping forms, elaborate cascades of color, bold fractures meant to catch the errant sunlight. Nothing feels complete. Each design chafes against the weight of expectation. Livia, watching her granddaughter's mounting frustration, suggests a night walk through the forgotten lanes of Murano. In their meandering, they pass shuttered ateliers and boarded windows, but also a scattering of living things, resilient marsh grass pushing up through cracks, a feral cat stretching on a sun-warmed sill, two boys skipping stones in the half-light. Alina feels, for the first time, the pulse of her city not only in craft and commerce, but in what endures when artistry falters, in ordinary continuance, in tenderness for the overlooked. She returns to the workbench with new intention. The piece should not be grand in scale, but capacious in spirit, a vessel for both memory and hope. Drawing from the language she has only just begun to speak, Alina selects not the pure, predictable rods of color, but fragments, the remnants of failed projects, the brittle edges of past mistakes, even shards unearthed from the workshop's oldest corners. Each carries its own charge of sorrow and stubbornness, of grace lost and rediscovered. Where once she would have fretted about flawlessness, now she searches for resonance, the secret gleam latent in every imperfection. The days fall away in a rhythm at once fevered and meditative. Alina turns the kiln with a heightened devotion, layering flashes of crimson, cobalt, and gold over beds of translucent debris. She works not to rival the treasures of palaces or museums, but to summon a chorus from many silenced voices. The glass resists as it always does, veining, buckling, twisting in new directions, refusing control. She yields to it, guiding gently, coaxing forth forms ruled as much by chance as by craft. Livia watches, a silent witness to her journey, sometimes lending a hand, more often simply keeping the workshop's rituals alive. Word slips out that a new piece is being made for the city's heart, crafted by the last lineage still tending Murano's ancient fire. Locals begin to visit, quietly at first, and then with a shyness tinged with ceremony. Some bring tokens, a handful of colored beads, a sliver of sea green from a broken lamp, pieces of cane unearthed in crumbling garden beds. Each artifact finds its way into Alina's work, fused by fire into the emerging whole. It becomes not just hers, but a community's testimony, an offering to the city's quiet resilience. Completion comes unexpectedly, in a moment between exhaustion and grace. Alina stands back to observe her creation, a soaring, irregular vessel, its surface alive with echoes and contradictions, ripples of the sea, veins of gold like threads lingering through marine fog, slivers of borrowed color holding the grief and gladness of many. It is not beautiful in the old sense, but in its shimmer, in the unpredictable interplay of form and fracture, there is a memorial and, quietly, a benediction. Livia rests a hand on Alina's arm and nods, her lips pressed into a shape that is neither smile nor frown, but something harder and more enduring. The procession to the square is a simple one. Neighbors lend strength and hands, carrying the vessel through streets swept by salt and shadow. As the autumn sun tips over the rooftops, gilding the square in indifferent brilliance, the piece is set atop its plinth. For a moment, Alina feels only emptiness, the labor behind her, the future unresolved, a hush as unknowable as the depths of the lagoon. Then the people, those who remain, step forward, placing hands on the glass, speaking to one another not of endings, but of what refuses to vanish, warmth that survives the cooling, memory lingering in substance and light. Beneath the glow of the waning sun, the vessel shivers with a last, miraculous glimmer. It is not the promised perpetuity of a golden age, but the hope of endurance, a radiance cast by countless hands and hearts refusing the dark, even as the world forgets to notice.